Hello, everyone. Welcome to LunchBytes. We are so excited to have you. My name is Steph Rogers, and I'm just going to walk you through some of our intro slides real quick. When we talk about our code of conduct, just as some reminders, is in today's episode, we expect everyone to be aware of others, be patient and friendly, be welcoming and respectful, being understanding of each other's differences, being open and to all questions and viewpoints, and being kind and considerate to others. If you want more details about our code of conduct, you can visit aka.ms/events. COC. Also, if you are interested in any sort of closed captions, those are available on demand as we're going to be using YouTube and Twitch today. And then just a quick intro as to what is LunchBytes. We're a show that airs every 2 weeks here in the UK. We have Annika, Asta, myself, and Tig, and we will always be joined by a technical expert, one of our teammates over here in the UK and Europe, to answer your top questions about Azure. So if you have any suggestions, please send us an email. UK developer engagement, go-to-market managers over here, working with the community and passing it off to Tig.
Hi everyone, I'm Tig Brennan. I'm one of the cloud solution architects in the UK. I work particularly in the digital and app innovation space. So this means I cover a lot of our serverless technologies and platform as a service areas, particularly focusing around the app dev space. So it's great to be co-hosting once again. And Annika, I'll hand over to you.
Hi everyone, my name's Annika. I am an app innovation specialist at Microsoft, so I look after similar things as Tig. However, I am less techy, I guess. Handing off to Asta.
Hi everyone, my name's Asta. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. And like Tig and Annika, I'm also in the app innovation team. And I specialize more in Power Platform technologies, so things such as Power Apps, Power Automates, and that suite of technologies. And I'll pass on to Steph.
Okay, great. I think Steph was already done the intro, but I just want to say it's brilliant to have the whole team together for the first time, pretty much everyone. And actually this week, we're going to be joined by Prakash. So Prakash, I'm just bringing you up on screen now for everyone. It's great to have you here on LunchBytes for the first time. I know you're going to be talking a lot around the message side of things in Azure, but first of all, do you want to give everyone an introduction to what you do at Microsoft?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Tig. Thank you, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon. I'm Prakash Bigala. I'm a cloud solution architect in Microsoft, based in the UK. I work in the digital and app innovation team as well, and in this role, I get to work with some of our strategic retail customers in the UK. And in their Azure journeys, and specifically my expertise being on app development, app innovation, and integration side of things, including cloud native. And I'm really excited to bring this session out. It's titled Message Transformation and Mapping Options in Azure. But again, the idea here is to actually come and illustrate the full toolkit and the option set, what we have, which are currently available today. If there are anything in preview, I'll call them out, and also how the plan looks like, and I'll try to compare them with what we have in terms of other products or other on-prem products, for example. So again, the idea is that if you are a user and you're thinking about either having some existing investments in your mapping technologies, whether it's on-prem or somewhere else, I would like to sort of bring these options together and give you options in terms of what's the best route for you to take. And similarly, even if it's a greenfield, for example, if you're coming and wanting to use integration platform as a service, which we have offered in the form of Azure Integration Services, again, I'll be talking about some of the considerations which you need to take before you choose a particular option. Again, this is based on working with some of our customers in here who have done a lot of integration work and looking at what good looks like and where we have done something where we had to go and revisit and things. So it's basically field lessons, and that's what I'm trying to bring it out today. In terms of the agenda today,
and before we jump into the content, Prakash, I just wanted to say for all those viewers who are joining us for the first time, that there will be some slides and there will be some demos. And the important thing about LunchBytes is that we have the opportunity for people to ask their questions live as well. So if you're joining for the first time or a repeat visitor, please do throw your questions into the comment section in the live stream. and we will get to those questions at the end. We have some designated time towards the end. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Prakash. Really excited for this session. I'll hand back to you to drive the slides.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tig. Yeah. So yeah, let's keep it interactive. Please post the questions. I'm sure Tig and the team, they will be moderating. And if there is anything which I'm speaking on, I'd pick up the question right away. Otherwise, I can leave it to the end and I'll answer all those questions as well. Yes, in terms of as I said, the objective of this session is to illustrate the options what we have today. And this is what the agenda looks like for today. For example, just to have a level set, I'll spend few minutes in terms of to just give you a context in terms of what a message is and why do you need to transform messages, right? I mean, what's the need for them in real life? So that's what I'll try to illustrate. And then I'll get into the details of what are the different options which are available, what are the different messaging formats which are available. And some of them are visual tools, some of them are you have to write code. But most importantly, the key thing what I want to cover today is to give you back some decision framework. Is okay, if you are going down this path, these are your options and these are your pitfalls, for example. And that's where I would like to be covering. Just to be making it very clear, what I'm trying to do here is not something which is a new service or something. So some of our offerings, whether it's XSLT mapping or liquid mapping, which I'll talk in a minute, have been there for some years now, right? Now, what I see out there is that, hey, you have this, you have that, and so many things, I don't know which one to choose. And this session, the idea is not to talk about those technologies which have been there for some time, but to actually give you some decision framework guidelines in terms of what good looks like in that space. Moving on, so just to give a context in terms of what a message is, in terms of what we're talking here, in its truest form, message is just some raw data produced by a system or a service or an application, whatever you want to call it. And most likely that message is being generated by, let's say, the source system or source service to be consumed by a destination system or a destination service or a destination application, right? And that's how the services talk, the applications talk. That's how, if you have a number of applications within your enterprise, that's how we make them talk, by exchanging messages. Now, or sometimes these messages are persisted in some sort of a database, even if that's the final resting place for them per se. For example, if you talk about microservices, the inter-service communication, what we talk about, right? So you're having multiple microservices talking to each other, are communicating using synchronous or asynchronous messaging patterns. Is exchange of those messages. And you also would have heard the term enterprise application integration, which is nothing but as an enterprise, you'll have a number of applications. You'll have a HR system, you have an accounting system, you have a customer relationship management system, and invariably these systems need to talk to each other. They cannot live in silos and just take the information and keep it them. I mean, they will be talking to each other. And what you'll find is that these applications are not, I mean, in an ideal world, all of them would be exactly the same. They understand the same language, they talk in the same language, they are built with the same technology set, but that's not how it is. Applications evolve in an enterprise. Some applications are 25 years old and some applications are brand new. Some applications you acquire as part of your acquisition. So therefore, you don't have full control in terms of what those message formats these applications are talking to each other, right? And most likely cannot go and influence that decision. I mean, it is what it is, and it's your job in terms of making sure that that application can talk to the rest of the landscape, whatever you have at the enterprise. And that's where, for example, my next thing, where what is the need for transformation, and that's where I'm leading into this one, where if you have these applications within your enterprise, which are varied in nature, some deal with files, some deal with JSON messages, some deal with XML messages, some even deal with some of our EDI files and things like that. Now, it's not only that, but also if you say customer as an object, the way the CRM system, perceives a customer object is very different to, let's say, I don't know, maybe a accounting system, right? So therefore, there is some, even if they're in this talking in the same format, there are some interchange of data in terms of the customer object is quite different in both the systems. Now, if you're trying to integrate these applications within your enterprise, typically you go and find an integration product which can solve these problems for you, right? And what is an integration platform, right? So just to give you a brief context, I mean, integration is something which can give you adaptation, mediation, transformation, orchestration layers. Now, one of the most important things of an integration layer is adaptation, which is the set of adapters or connectors which you have, which means how easily can you connect between a variety of systems. So when you are going and evaluating these products, one of the primary thing you will look at, hey, I have these legacy systems, I have these modern systems. Does this integration product have enough built-in connectors which will make my life easier when I'm going about connecting those systems? Then you have the transformation layer also, what sort of capabilities does this integration product have? Does it help me with visual mappers? Does it support some of the industry standards, whether it's XSLT for XML transformation, or whether it's liquid maps for JSON transformation, whether it's EDI standards, the EDIFACT standards? Does this integration product give me those options, not only to connect to various systems, but also to deal with those variety of formats? And then obviously I'm not going to talk about the orchestration capabilities, because that's for a different call. But the point I'm trying to make is transformation in an integration product is as essential as connectors, because you may have all the connectors and you can connect all the systems, but you don't have enough tooling to transform messages from one format to other format. Then suddenly you will find the developer community, for example, who are using the product, a little bit struggling in terms of getting those mapping things out, in terms of the productivity, in terms of the user experience and things like that. And just to say, there's no one solution which fits all, because we're talking about a variety of formats which are coming from a long time ago to latest formats. And also there are customers who sort of using some standards. There are customers who like visual mappers. So we need to cater to these needs, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in terms of what are the available options and which one will suit for what sort of scenarios. Now, in this context, although I spoke about integration as any integration service, I'm going to talk about Azure Integration Services, right? So Azure Integration Services is Azure's offering of IPaaS, which is Integration Platform as a Service, right? Now, the objective of Azure Integration Services when this product is built is it should have enough connectors, as in we should be extremely agile in terms of developing and providing those connectors to go and connect to those systems. But also, one of the important things is what sort of options you have for transformations. In terms of Azure Integration Services, for those who are not familiar, it is a suite of products in Azure, which generally constitutes of Azure Logic Apps, Azure Functions, Azure APM, Service Bus, Event Grid, Event Hub. The way you put these together gives you the ability in terms of integrating between systems. For example, Azure Logic Apps is responsible for some of the orchestration capabilities, some of the adaptation capabilities with its rich set of connectors, and it is also responsible for the transformation capabilities which is given. Azure Service Bus, for example, gives you that asynchronous messaging solution for an iPaaS platform like Azure Integration Services. And what I would be specifically talking is the mapping options which are available in Azure Integration Services. So getting into the the actual options which are in Azure Integration Services, I've listed a few of these here, right? And the idea is that I'll be going into each one of them and I'll be giving you a brief. The idea is at the end, I'll be showing you some of them in action in terms of how they look. But then like, sort of if you're familiar with any of these technology set, you should be aware. But at the end, nevertheless, just to level set, I'll show you some of these things. Starting with, we have an XSLT mapper, liquid template mapper. We have something called built-in data operations. We have something called integration account. You can use Azure Functions with XSL compile transform. With the advent of Logic Apps standard, you can run that in the same runtime as Logic Apps. And now we have introduced .NET Framework assembly support in Logic Apps standard last month as well. Now, don't worry too much about the list here. What idea is to take you through each one of those. Starting with XSLT, this is a standard, right? I mean, there's nothing to do with Azure, nothing to do with any other particular partner or vendor or cloud provider. It's an extensible style sheet language, and it's in the industry for a long time. It's widely used as a standard for XML data transformation. We are currently in XSLT 3.0. The good thing about this is, like, you can use this as a programming language for transforming XML documents. I mean, you get all sorts of programming constructs where you can deal with complex XML mapping, like loops, and like going and getting the detail which is hidden in few depths down and things like that. We support XSLT as a primary way of mapping for any of your XML needs. We do support in terms of, like, how I'll come to the part in terms of how do you author this, right? So thing is, you can start on a notepad and start writing XSLT, for example, like, if you know what I'm saying about, but also we offer certain visual mapper tools where you can actually drag and drop some of these mappings, and we will generate these XSLT files for you. But the bottom line is, XSLT is a standard, and this is a standard which is going to be there for a long time, because out there, if you look at the enterprise applications, XML is predominant. I mean, so therefore, mapping from and to XML is going to be there for a long time, and XSLT will be there and support. And also, we are providing rich set of developer ecosystem around that to make it more productive in terms of, like, authoring these files. The next one which we support, it's primarily, like, you can call this liquid templates, and these are like XSLT for JSON in some sense. Again, this is a standard, nothing to do with. So the reason why I'm talking about the standard so much is, like, the investments what you make on these mapping technologies should be reusable. It's not like you're coming in and spending a lot of effort in writing these, like, whether it's XSLT or liquid templates, or you may have existing assets. The reason why standards work well is because you can take this as an asset and you can repurpose elsewhere for a similar mapping, or when you're migrating or, like, moving away from one to the other. This would be very useful, and hence the importance of supporting standards instead of having any vendor specific formats, for example. So liquid is, again, I'll show you. I mean, you can see here, probably not as clearly, but that's how you write. Again, it looks like more of a markup language. It looks like a little bit like JSON, for example, but you can do all sorts of, like, loops and, like, extracting data, again, just like how you can do with XSLT. It's quite powerful language in terms of extracting or transforming JSON messages. Now, as we speak, there is no visual mapper for liquid. I mean, if you want to write liquid, you go and use your favorite IDE, Visual Studio Code, for example. I use it, and you have an extension for liquid, and you can go and author these templates. But the idea is that we should have some sort of visual mapper where you have two JSON documents and you can sort of visually map them, and behind the scenes we generate this .liquid file for you, which you can go and upload wherever you need to get your mapping going. The next option is built-in data operations. Again, I'll show you in a minute. I mean, so what you're seeing on that screen there is, like, some of the operations which are built in, which means you don't need to go and write any XSLT or JSON or something for simpler mappings, right? For example, you got a JSON array and you want to filter that array based on filter that array whose order value is more than 1,000 because I need to send it to a special queue, a priority queue, or something like that. Yes, you can go and do a map, and you can sort of have a liquid template which can do that for you. But to solve some of those simpler scenarios, we provide some of these built-in data operations. And what you can see is that, so for example, filter array is there fifth in the list. And all it does is I'll show you in a minute again as part of my demo, that it takes in an array, it takes in a filter criteria, and it emits out the filtered array. As simple as that. Then you have something called compose shape, for example, the shape. If you want to actually create a message right from the scratch and take some data which is coming in, you can actually compose a message like that, or you can combine 2 or 3 JSON messages which are coming in into one big array. For example, you can use compose. Parsing JSON, again, the name implies there, creating a CSV table, creating a HTML table, and things like that. So when I show you the decision framework in terms of when to use XSLT, when to use liquid, when to use built-in data operations, you would see that your first port of operation should be you use built-in if you're able to. I mean, if your mapping is not complex enough, if you're able to achieve with these ones, that's the best way to go, mainly because of you're not maintaining and managing any external assets and things like that. So again, we will see a bit more once we go. So if you can expand on this slide a bit by probably going full screen, maybe. Thank you. So what I have here is, I hope you can read it, a sort of a decision tree where we may sort of which route to take with the given options what we have talked about so far. For example, when you start, you will make a decision whether you are using Logic Apps Consumption or Logic Apps Standard. Now, for those who don't know, it's basically a hosting plan. So if you're using Logic Apps, you can either host it in a consumption plan, which is also called serverless plan, which means it's running out there in Azure in your chosen region, in one of our server farms. Or we also have this option of hosting that same Logic app in a single tenant model where you would be actually using an app service plan or a workflow service plan, which means that particular compute is dedicated for you, and you would be paying for that particular compute, and you can deploy any number of Logic apps onto that app service plan or the workflow service plan. Now, this session is not about choosing which is right or wrong. I mean, that's totally a different topic. In terms of consumption, you pay for what you use, whereas with standard, for example, you do buy your app service plan, and then you can go and deploy. And if you're not able to manage that, some other throttling and things like that will occur. Now, if you have a Logic app, if you're going down either consumption or standard, and if your mappings are very simple, which means all you're trying to do is filter an array or take couple of fields from the incoming messages. Let's say you're getting two JSON messages from 2 different sources, and all you need to do is construct a third message which is picking up a couple of fields from the first message and picking another couple of fields from the second message. You can easily do it with a compose shape with just inline script or inline code, which you can do. So that would be the port of call for all sorts of simple things. I mean, as you actually work with Logic apps and maps and things like that, there will be scenarios where even though if you're using XSLT and Liquid, you would still be using this built-in data operations, for example. But if it is a complex map, which means whether it's XML or JSON, I mean, I did not go because the decision framework was getting too complex, and that's the reason I made it XML or JSON mapping, and XSLT for XML or Liquid for JSON. A couple of options here. If you're using consumption, either you can upload, author these XSLT files or the Liquid templates or JSON and upload into integration account, or you can use, what is an integration account? It's a storage plus compute which you buy, where you can upload your schemas and maps, And when a particular message comes, the mapping execution happens within the integration account's compute. Or you can also use Azure Functions, for example, to run the same map, which means you pass the message as well as the XSL file. Either you pass the message, XSL file, or it can pick it from a storage account, for example, and it can help you map and spit out the output, which can go back into the logic apps as well. Now, the choice between whether it's integration account or Azure Functions, I'll come in the next couple of slides. There are certain considerations, whether it's cost or performance and things like that. We'll talk about it. But for now, both those options are open. You can choose. If you have existing integration account investments, you can upload your maps in there and you can get away with it. Or if you don't have integration account, and if cost is a concern because we don't have a serverless plan for integration account, I'll come to that in a minute, you can always use Azure Functions. Now, Azure Functions is nothing but other runtime where you can do some compute, and all we do is pass in the message, pass in the XSL file, and that will do the transformation and send the message back to you. In case of Logic App Standard, for example, along with these options, we also have the Logic Apps runtime itself, which means instead of you depending on either an integration account, which is a separate runtime outside, which means whenever a map call is made, it makes a call into the integration account, and then the integration account comes back with a response. Or to make a call out into Azure Function, you can actually have this map run in the same runtime as the Logic App which is running. It's only available in Logic App Standard because it is running in an app service plan. So therefore, we can target your app service plan and run this map and keep the output there, which means you don't need to go out and come. Again, I'll talk about which one is the right option in terms of some of the frame decisions what you take. Moving on to the next one, and this is where I will be talking about the top considerations, right? So mainly I'm talking about cost, performance, existing investments, and skills. Now, if you are in a situation where, hey, you know what, your decision framework looks good, but I'm having multiple options now, I don't know which one to choose. And that's where the next couple of slides hopefully should help you. The first one being the cost, right? If you are running your integrations as serverless, right? So which means you only pay for what you use. Your Azure Functions is serverless, Azure Logic Apps is serverless, but the integration account, what I spoke about, where you can upload these maps and schemas, and it also gives you a compute runtime where these maps are executed. That does not, it is not serverless. I mean, it's basically you have a couple of SKUs, basic and standard, and you buy that particular SKU. And whether you use it or not, you will pay for it. I mean, whatever the dollar value for that one. Now, integration account is fantastic if you're able to maximize the usage. It typically costs about 700, 800 pounds for a higher SKU, but it's much cost effective if you're going to a lower SKU, for example. And it is very good if you're able to maximize the usage. But what I've seen in my experience is there are customers who absolutely use it and they get what they paid for in terms of value. But also there are customers who are starting on this journey or having a very simple maps, and having an integration account next to it may not make sense in some sense. So nevertheless, the choice is yours, but always think about how many maps you have, what sort of volumes you're driving. Does that warrant integration account, for example? If it is, definitely go for it. But there will be cases where it may not be, and that's where you can have these other options. And that's the reason. And the other thing is we have this old, ADFACT and trading partner agreements for B2B messaging, which again, a lot of this integration product support. We do support that one. But as of today, if you have any such requirements, integration account is mandatory. I mean, you have to have integration account. There is no other option. So the first thing is hey, do you have any ADFACT or trading partner agreements? If yes, yeah, go with integration account. Or do you have enough maps to fully utilize the integration account because you have paid for something? And if you underutilize it, which means you're not making the most of the value what you're getting, If you have enough of those, and if you think that's the right thing, then go and use integration account again. But if the answer is no for both of them, then based on the logic app hosting type, for example, if it's a consumption plan, you can go and execute this map in an Azure function, which can run either in an app service plan or on a consumption plan, which means if you are executing 10 maps per day, you get you will be charged for those particular instantiations or executions in the Azure functions. And then on the Logic Apps workflow service plan, for example, you can actually run these maps within the same place where the Logic App is running. So you don't need to go out even to Azure functions, but rather run it in the same. I mean, so if cost is a consideration and you're doing a lot of sort of serverless and things like that, and if integration account is stopping you, I'm trying to give you some of the options here. And I have had experiences where I implemented, for example, we started with integration account, and slowly with the volumes and some of these things, we had to switch back to Azure functions for various reasons. I'll talk as we come to the performance and that side of things. So it is quite normal that you would be there would be difficulty in choosing some of these options, and sometimes you make the right choice you think at the time, but based on the volumes, based on the number of maps, you may have to change those decisions as well. The next one which I want to talk about is the performance considerations, or the throughput and latency, for example. Now, integration account comes in basically two SKUs, basic and standard. I mean, there's typically three. There's a free SKU as well, but I'm ignoring that one. But basic and standard, which you can use. For most of the use cases, it is standard which you use, which comes at a particular price. Now, the thing with integration account is you cannot choose the compute size for that one, right? I mean, if you want, you can have more of those. I want 2 of integration accounts, 3 of integration accounts, but you do not decide, hey, can my integration account run on a 16-core machine? No, you can't. Now, what happens because of this is sometimes based on the intensity of your maps, some maps are quite complex. I mean, they do a lot of stuff, a lot of looping, a lot of sort of writing, going back and forth, and they can be quite expensive in terms of compute. And if your integration account is not able to cope, then it starts to throttle the requests because, again, it can't scale. I mean, if you want, you can add more integration accounts. So if you, as part of your performance testing or based on the volumetrics, if you feel like the inability to choose a higher compute size for integration account is going to inhibit you, the recommendation would be to actually go and use, let's say, some of these other options, right? Whether it's if you're standard, the workflow service plan, or if you're Azure Function, the app service plan. The reason being, you can actually choose an app service plan with a much higher SKU. I mean, you pay more for that, but the point is, if your maps are complex, if your maps take a lot of compute, you can throw so much of compute in some of these other options. So therefore, integration account, even though you're making the most of it, but you may have to spin multiple of those and things like that. Again, it's not sort of yes or no decision. Sometimes you have to figure it out. As I said, we started with integration account and then we had to move to a different option when we started our performance testing. Next time, probably we'll understand the volumes much better and we will make those decisions up front, which would be much more seamless, I would think. And that's the reason why it is so important that you're not going and reinventing the wheel. If you write an XSL, for example, XSLT, you can upload it in an integration account, or you can upload in a storage account and the function can pull it down and you can map it. So your mapping investment is intact. It's not changing based on where you which option you choose. So therefore, that gives you that leeway in terms of making that late decision during your testing cycles as well. But if you're able to sort of understand all of these things and make those right decisions, for example. And finally, the other consideration which I would take is existing investments in mapping, right? Now, a lot of customers are coming from some sort of an integration product, whether it's on-prem or somewhere, right? I'll talk an example, right? I mean, because like Microsoft has a integration product in the name of Bestrock Server, a very popular one. It has been deployed across many enterprises over a number of years, and we have a huge presence out there. And over these years, there were a number of investments, like in terms of maps which were created, in terms of like orchestrations which were created, and things like that. Now we need to cater in terms of like, hey, what is your existing investments, and if you're trying to move away from some of those, and so that you can come into like some sort of flexible model like iPaaS, reinventing all those maps is not something which you want to do, and that's not going to give you any business benefit, to be honest, because these are generally business rules and maps, and you have done. So if you have existing mapping investments, sometimes your decision making will depend on what those investments are and where will they primarily run. Even if that means if it's running only an integration account, and even if you have only a couple of maps, your best bet is to use integration account, because reinventing those maps it will be a much like larger effort and things like that. So keep in mind what are the options, or what are the existing investments, whether it's in the form of XSLTs, right? Or any liquid templates which you have. All those things do consider, and based on that you can decide. And what we have is also an option where you can use, I'll talk about that in a minute, where you can use some of the .NET framework extensions. So if you're coming from Bestrock background, when you're writing maps, you can actually use some of these functoids or helper classes, where if the map is unable to drag and not able to do, it's a little bit of complex, you can write a piece of code or a helper function and you can do that. Now we do provide those extensions, which means you can bring in that DLL and you can upload those assemblies, for example, into the integration account, and we will honor that map, which means you can take an existing map, literally upload it into, let's say, integration account, and even it's in Azure Functions, Azure Logic App Standard, and it should work. Even if there are any small tweaks, it is, but it's not that you're going to rewrite any of those things. Finally, I thought that was the final one, but yeah, going to the visual mapping tools, right? So again, this is one more consideration. This comes down to the skilling part of it, right? So if you have investments, or you have developers who are more looking, or you have like sort of business analysts who would want to do mapping, for example, the idea of visual mapping tools is like to take that, because a lot of this mapping is business knowledge, right? A technical person who is implementing generally does not know which field goes to which field, or what an order ID in an edifact message, it goes like some weird codes, or if you go and connect to a SAP iDoc, for example, they have their own codes, and generally it is a business analyst who will know what does that mean and how does that should look on the other side. Now, some of these visual mapping tools gives you that opportunity where instead of someone writing this XSL, you can actually drag and drop, and the business analyst can do it, and hopefully that should generate an XSL which you can upload. It's not as straightforward as that most of the times. For simple maps it works, but there is a bit of a technology and a business combination which works. But nevertheless, visual mapping tools has its place in terms of like it's easy to start with. XSLT as a language, you need to put some effort, whereas mapping tool, like anyone can quickly pick it up. Similarly, we will also be having a JSON mapping tool, for example. Again, the investments are there to cater to those who want some of a visual mapper, which can increase their productivity, or at least stick to their preferences or their skill sets, whatever is available for them. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about in terms of like trying to give the options, but also try to give you some of the decisions in terms of like what are the things you need to consider. I hope it's useful, but in a minute I'll show you some of those things. I'm happy to take a pause before I switch to my screen. Anything which I need to, any questions or anything like that, Tyke?
we have had one question come up from Manish Patel around Edifact use, and actually I believe you're working with Manish apparently on a day-to-day basis. So it might be something that you can cover offline with Manish, but it's generally more of an interest in terms of Edifact, more of the information around its use within integration accounts. So, for example, looking at the maps, creating the schema out of the Edifact file.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can quickly cover, like, sort of, to be honest, like, just it's quite timely. I think this week I had a customer conversation on this very topic, where they wanted to set up some B2B trading partner agreements, for example, and one of them is to use the Edifact order message, which is this huge schema. I don't understand too much of that Edifact standard, but essentially, like, the message which was coming in was just this Edifact message, and using the mapper to get the order date and order ID from that, and then decode it, because these messages, like, decoding is the difficult part. I mean, so that's where some of our logic app investments in terms of, like, using the Edifact decoder, which can do that, as well as the mapping and setting up the trading partner and agreements. I mean, I should have that demo with me. I may show a little bit of that as well, but that's where, like, sort of we use it's not just Edifact, but even X12 and Rosetta.NET also. Though some of them are, Rosetta.NET is not supported in Logic App Standard as of now, but in consumption, yes, yeah. But I'm happy to take it offline and show the demo and stuff like that.
Okay, brilliant. We've got about 10 minutes worth of time for the demos now,
Yeah.
Prakash, is that right? And then we'll jump into a few remaining questions at the end.
Awesome. If you can switch to my screen, please.
Yep, I will switch now. There you go.
Awesome. Now, like, sort of, there's a simple dashboard which I've created. Again, the idea here is, like, sort of, let me show some of the mapping options, how they look like in your. So I have, like, so I'm using, sorry, I can't move the screen. Yeah, so I'm using a work Logic App Standard, and I happen to have 3 Logic Apps here. And like, for example, the first one, for example, we can go and look at the XSLT mapping, and all of them are HTTP triggered. So what you can see is, like, sort of, I mean, these Logic Apps are triggered by HTTP. It could be triggered by anything else. To keep it simple, that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to show you, like, in terms of, like, how do you transform this XML using XSLT. So I have an XSLT file, for example, which I will show to you. Yeah, so this is the XSLT file. I mean, this is how it looks. It's sort of a programming language. I mean, it's written in XML in some sense, but it has these constructs like for each, like, you can check for conditions if the price, for example, like, what is the price and things like that. It can go into average. It can do, I mean, there are built-in functions which you can use and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'll be passing, like, for example, this XML message, and this particular XSLT will take in the message, and it will go through these things and tries to spit out a message which is like, a modified version of that XML. And the idea is to, like, show. And all I do is, like, once you author these XSL files, which is XSLT, for example, you would be actually uploading them into. So when you have Logic App Standard, under artifacts, you have these 2 folders which are schemas and maps, for example. So I would have uploaded that particular XSLT file in there. Now, by doing so, it's basically, like, within the same runtime. It's a storage location. It's a glorified storage for me, where I uploaded these files. As you see, it supports .xslt and .liquid. XSLT being for XML and liquid being for JSON files. And in this particular case, once I come back to the workflow, which is the XSLT mapping, when I use a transform XML shape, in this case, for example, it will let me choose all the maps which are available. I mean, in this case, I only happen to have one .xslt file, and that's the reason why it is showing that to me. It doesn't show .liquid because for liquid you have to use a different liquid template action, and that's where it shows. And just by doing that, it will take the message and transform it back. And response, right? I mean, I can send the same response back, which is the transformed message. Let's say, save this. Okay. Right. Yeah, that's one. And the response will be transformed content. Okay. Sorry.
Maybe if you jump out or go back to its original state that you had it in before, and we can trigger it off of that.
Yeah. Yeah, all I was doing was sort of the response I was trying to, because you have these expressions called at JSON. So the transformed message, I was converting it back into JSON, and that's what is coming back. And if I open up Postman as a way to actually trigger these, for example, so this is the file which I want to send, and this is the URL I'm posting to. And if I should be getting, I mean, it is an XML, but at the end I did add JSON, which means when I took that XML, which is that, and I just wanted to show you that you do have certain operations within built-in operations where you can actually convert between XML and JSON if it is just a quick, simple conversion. But otherwise, the idea here is sort of you authored an XSL. How did you author? Doesn't matter, whether you went to a visual tool and then it spit out an XSL, or you hand wrote this one, or you went and got it from somewhere, which is one of your on-prem systems. Doesn't matter. The extension should be .xslt, and it goes into that. It's exactly the same process for integration account. So the same thing if I were to do in integration account, for example, you exactly have the schemas, maps, but in addition, you have, as I said, it supports external assemblies, partners, and agreements for that B2B, and that's where the ADFACT things will come into picture as well. And we have some other Rosetta.NET and stuff like that. So that's about XSLT. Quickly jumping onto the liquid map again. The map itself looks something like this. So here I'm actually hand creating a JSON message, which should look like, it should have these sort of fields: customer name, company name, order date, order value, delivery address, order details, and it does some looping and stuff like that. But what should be in there, I'm getting it from the incoming message. So the message which I'm posting, it's going and getting the data. Maybe in this case, it's concatenating first name and last name to give the customer name and stuff like that, and it's looping through the order items and things like that. And this would be the order JSON which I would like to pass to this particular logic app, for example. So I would have, this is the .liquid file which I've uploaded into the integration account, and or even for the workflow plan. And this is the file which I will be sending. So this is how it looks like in terms of liquid mapping. If I go to the designer. So here I'm using a liquid transform JSON to JSON, for example, and if I sort of were to do this in, you will see other options as well, which is JSON to JSON, JSON to text, XML to JSON, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, this is where I would be sending the post. I'll just quickly conclude now. And hopefully that's the mapped content. Again, this is nothing groundbreaking, all this stuff, but the main thing is in terms of what are the options available to you. And finally, I wanted to leave you with a point in terms of we do now support custom assemblies. I mean, .NET Framework extensibility support in Logic App Standard as well. It was always there in consumption using integration account. But with Logic App Standard, we got that it is in preview. There is a good blog by Kent Ware and also video demonstrating that. I would recommend, in case if you have existing best stock investments, that should be a very good one in that sense. So yeah.
Great. And I think some of those liquid transformations can be used, for example, in scenarios where maybe you're looking to get it into like a canonical form and then your system needs some other format, right? And so I think this is a really good solution, particularly in mappings, for a lot of modern API development now as well, where you're fixing a relationship between an older system and something new. And you, like you said in that first example, you originally had some XML and you did a transformation at the end and chucked it into JSON, because maybe your modern API might need JSON as the format, right? And I think that's some of the really powerful aspects of these transformations.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. Yeah, definitely. And finally, like, in terms of as I said, the built-in mapping, I mean, you have all this data operations which you can play with, filtering an array, composing an array, and things like that. I'm not going to labor the point in terms of doing that, but happy to, like, in sort of questions or anything like that in the interest of time as well.
Yeah. Okay. Asta, I think if you want to bring yourself up on stream, we can jump on to probably some of those questions that we've got.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic job, Prakash, as well. So we have a question. So will these mapping investments which we make in Logic Apps follow standards, or will it be anything Azure specific?
Yeah. In some sense, I've gone through that one. So again, the idea here is that we want to follow the industry standards, whether it's liquid or whether it's XSLT. We are not doing anything custom. The idea being you can easily bring in your investments. At the same time, you can take out your investments as well. But we want to make this seamless in terms of following the standard. So that commitment is definitely there. And whether it's XSLT 3.0, and even we have the standards for XSLT 4.0, and we are in line in terms of, like, supporting some of those things. So yeah.
Cool, thank you. And another question we have is, we know the ISE is being deprecated. What can we do now to future-proof our mappings in Azure?
Yes, so you would have seen that news in terms of, again, for those who don't know, ISE, it's an integrated service environment. Now, when Logic Apps was just in consumption, there was a lot of customers asking for, like, hey, we love your Logic Apps, but we don't like that it being out there. I want it in my VNet. And the answer for that question was what we created, something called integrated service environment. I mean, the name sounds familiar with ACE, which is App Service Environment. But the idea is similar, that to inject the Logic App runtime inside the VNet. and that was unblocking some of our customers in terms of, like, reaching to on-prem and things like that. But with the advent of Logic App Standard, a lot of that pain has been taken away in a much more easier way. And therefore, it has been decided that there is no new investments going into ISE, and it will be deprecated, given the fact that we are supporting standard, and that gives you the things what you need. Now, as far as the mappings are concerned, I mean, just to, like, sort of plug in a tool here, I mean, we do have a migration tool between ISE. So for example, if you have ISE Logic Apps, there is a tool which can actually walk you through in terms of listing all those things and migrating into a Logic App Standard, and we can use the same tool from Logic App consumption to standard as well. Now, similarly, like, because these were using some of the integration account investments as well, these maps can be directly used wherever you go, whether it's Logic App Standard, you can upload them in there, or if like, using Azure Functions, you can do that. So as far as mapping is concerned, you're covered. The only thing is, like, you need to go through that tool in terms of switching from ISE to a Logic App Standard. Okay.
Cool, thank you. And I think we have just one more question. So could you talk a little bit more about the .NET framework support, which was announced last month?
Yes. Now this one, right? This is something which is very exciting for those who have been, let's say, having a lot of stock investments and waiting to move away into some sort of an iPaaS solution, but they were not able to do because some of their maps had this dependencies on .NET framework. For example, when we used to create maps, let's say you wanted to, I don't know, add add to numbers or add some time to a date time and things like that. There were cases where we used to write these helper functions which were reusable, and you can pull them into the map. And the map used to make a call out to that .NET Framework assembly and get the output back and then map into the destination, right? Now, when we didn't have this support, we had to actually take the map, strip out all the places where we had this external assembly which we have included, and try to implement that with native XSLT. And that I have found out that it's not as simple as we think, because the maps are huge, the XSLTs are huge. Some of this knowledge has been been there for 10 years ago. We don't find the people who have written those maps, and understanding them, decoding them is quite an exercise. Now, with this announcement, what it means is you can bring your map along with the DLL, what the support, the external assembly, what you can upload it into the assembly section. You can use it in logic app consumption straight away. It's always there, but it was a new thing in standard, and it's a welcome move. Again, I highly recommend you go through that Kent Ware's blog, which he posted last month, and also the demo which he has done. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Prakash. Thank you, Asta. What brilliant session. I love the demos that you're showing there. Thank you as well for all the information from the slides as well. So we're going to move on from this section, and we're going to jump on to our developer news radar. So I'm just going to bring up those slides now. And a couple of quick announcements on our end. And let me jump back a slides. Or maybe, there we go. Sorry, I had a little technical issue there. Just wanted to say, public preview for Azure SQL Trigger for Azure Functions has just been announced. So the way that Azure Functions work is that they utilize what's called bindings. So it's a way for you to get your data in and out of a certain system. So whether it's a SQL database, then you can use input bindings to add data, and then you can use an output binding to get data out of that SQL database. And now you can try in public preview is a way that if you make a change in your SQL database, for example, you update a row or you delete a row, something like that, then that can now trigger your Azure function to go ahead and do something. And we also have the general availability of TLS 1.3 with App Gateway as well. And then we also have some GitHub updates as well. So if you look out for the GitHub Actions importer tool, which is now available. So if you're looking at some pipelines that you've been running in Jenkins, for example, and you're looking at switching and running in GitHub Actions, then you can use this importer. And there's also CodeQL, which is code scanning, and it's launching the support of Kotlin, Kotlin is a sort of key programming language for Android application development. And so CodeQL code scanning really allows you to detect vulnerabilities in your code. And it's a really powerful tool that they use in GitHub. Now, Steph, I know there's some announcements that you wanted to cover on the festive tech calendar. And apologies for stealing your thunder a little bit a moment ago, but do you want to bring us through those?
Those are important updates to share. And so in addition to what you can get plugged
Steph, I can't hear you, actually.
No. That is a bummer.
I don't know, Asta, can you hear Steph?
No, it's quite faint.
Hello.
Okay.
Nope.
No, apologies, Steph, we can't hear you. We might have to revisit that in a minute then, if you can sort out that side of things. So I'll quickly just touch on some of the other aspects of LunchBytes that we have. And so if you're already working with us at Microsoft and you've got an account team that you can work with, then please do reach out to them and get involved with some of our open hacks and cloud skills challenges that we run. And if you're looking for some information on what are these, then please do drop us a note at lunchbytes@microsoft.com. We'd be really willing to help you. You can also check out our UK Developer Hub at aka.ms/UK Developer. And then one other thing you can do is you can look at some of the communities that we have across the UK that you can go and join. So you can go and find your local community. And you can do this by visiting this site, aka.ms/UK Developer Community, where you can look at some of the different communities that we've got on offer. So maybe you want to join the Thames Valley region and we're running Azure related topics there, then that'd be a great thing to do. We also have one of the new communities in Azure Yorkshire, And so if you're up that way, then please do get involved with those sessions. And we also have our LunchBytes playlist. So this is the last thing before I hand back to you, Steph, just to check on that volume. But you can visit our playlist, so all of the episodes that we have at aka.ms/lunchbytes. So the most recent one was my own session with GraphQL. Where it's, Steph, how are you doing on your end? I'm afraid we still can't hear you, unfortunately. But what Steph is trying to get across is, if you can, please do visit this website. So aka.ms/festive tech calendar. So you can go, it's by the communities, for the communities, go in throughout the month of December, go and look at the calendar of events that we've got running within the Microsoft developer side of things. It'd be brilliant to get involved with that. And we hope you can join on our festive tech calendar. Okay. So apologies, Steph, we couldn't hear you at the end. I hope I was able to cover everything that you wanted to cover on that side. And for people joining us in the next session, in 2 weeks' time, we've got a LunchBytes session by Chris Reddington, who used to be one of our co-hosts. And so we've invited him back to talk around end-to-end inner sourcing and secure development with GitHub. So it's going to be a brilliant session. Please do join us again at 12 o'clock on December the 14th. Thank you, Asta. Thank you, Steph. Thanks, Annika. And most importantly, thank you, Prakash, for a great session today. Cheers, everyone. See you in 2 weeks' time.